Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be treated like garbage in your own home? To be beaten, starved, and told you're worthless every single day for 3 years? That was Soo-Yeon's life. But here's the thing about pushing someone to their absolute breaking point. Sometimes they don't break. Sometimes they become something far more dangerous than you ever imagined. And when Soo-Yeon discovered the truth about who she really was, the people who made her suffer were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. The slap echoed through the elegant dining room of the Kang family mansion in Gangnam, Seoul. Soo-Yeon's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning with the familiar sting of her stepmother's palm. She didn't cry anymore. She had stopped crying 18 months ago when she realized her tears only seemed to encourage them. "You call this cooking?" Madame Kang sneered, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Soo-Yeon's arm hard enough to leave marks that would take weeks to fade. "Even a street dog could prepare better rice than this. You're absolutely useless. After everything we've done for you, letting you live in our home, putting a roof over your ungrateful head. And this is how you repay us?" Soo-Yeon kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her heart hammering in her chest. The rice was perfect. She knew it was perfect. She had learned to cook from Mrs. Lee, the old housekeeper who had taken pity on her, and she had spent hours perfecting every dish. But nothing she ever did would be good enough for this family. Not since the day her father remarried 3 years ago, bringing this viper and her daughter into their home. 6 months later, her father died in a car accident that the police ruled as simple negligence, but that Soo-Yeon had always suspected was something more sinister. And then her nightmare truly began. "Mother, why are you wasting your energy on her?" A melodic voice floated in from the doorway. Yoo-jin, Madame Kang's biological daughter, entered the dining room like a princess surveying her domain. She was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Soo-Yeon's entire wardrobe had been before they took everything from her. The clothes, the jewelry her real mother had left her, even the photographs of her father. All of it confiscated, sold, or destroyed. "Let the servant do her job. I need you to help me prepare for the charity gala tonight. I heard the son of Chairman Park will be there, and I need to look my absolute best." Servant. That's what she was now. The daughter of Kang Jae-won, once a respected businessman who had built his company from nothing, reduced to serving the woman who had wormed her way into their family through calculated seduction and false promises of love. "You're right, darling." Madame Kang released Soo-Yeon's arm with a final shove that sent her stumbling against the wall, her hip connecting painfully with the marble corner. "Clean this mess up, and then prepare Yoo-jin's evening gown, the red Valentino. Make sure there's not a single wrinkle, or I'll make you regret it. And don't even think about eating until all your work is done. You're getting too fat anyway. Disgusting." Soo-Yeon nodded silently, her hands trembling as she began gathering the dishes. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She hadn't eaten in almost 2 days, surviving only on the scraps she could salvage from their plates when no one was watching, but she had learned to ignore it. Complaining only earned her more punishment. The last time she had asked for food, Madame Kang had locked her in the storage closet for 48 hours without water. As the two women swept out of the room, their laughter trailing behind them like poison, Soo-Yeon allowed herself one moment of weakness. She leaned against the cold marble wall and closed her eyes, remembering her father's gentle smile, the way he used to call her his little star, the warmth of his embrace when she was scared or sad. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? How had she gone from being the cherished daughter of a successful man to this? A slave in her own home, beaten and starved by the woman her father had trusted with his life. She pressed her hand against her empty stomach and felt the sharp protrusion of her ribs. When she had first come to live with the Kangs, she had been healthy, vibrant, full of life. Now she was a shadow of herself, her clothes hanging off her skeletal frame, her hair brittle and dull, dark circles permanently etched under her eyes from too many sleepless nights, on the cold floor of the storage closet they called her room. What she didn't know What she couldn't possibly have known was that everything she believed about her life was a lie, and the truth was about to shatter her world in ways she never could have imagined. The next morning brought more of the same cruelty that had become the rhythm of Soo-Yeon's existence. She woke at 5, before the rest of the household stirred, to begin her endless list of duties, scrubbing floors on her hands and knees, preparing breakfast that she wasn't allowed to eat, ironing clothes until her arms ached, polishing silver until she could see her own haunted reflection in every piece. By noon, her body was screaming with exhaustion, but there was no rest for her. There never was. "Soo-Yeon!" Yoo-jin's shrill voice rang through the mansion. "Get up here now!" She climbed the stairs to Yoo-jin's room, her legs trembling with weakness. When she opened the door, she found Yoo-jin standing in front of her mirror, holding a pair of scissors and a victorious smile. "Look what I found in your pathetic little closet." Yoo-jin held up a faded photograph, the only picture of Soo-Yeon's mother that she had managed to hide from the purge of her possessions. "Who said you could keep this?" "Please." The word escaped before Soo-Yeon could stop it. "Please. That's all I have left of her. Please don't." "Don't what?" Yoo-jin's smile widened. "Don't this?" She placed the scissors against the photograph and began to cut, slowly, deliberately, making sure Soo-Yeon watched as her mother's face was destroyed piece by piece. "No!" Soo-Yeon lunged forward, but Yoo-jin was faster. She shoved Soo-Yeon back, sending her crashing to the floor. "How dare you try to touch me!" Yoo-jin shrieked. "Mother! Mother, come quickly! The servant attacked me!" Madame Kang arrived within seconds, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Her eyes swept over the scene, her daughter standing over the cowering Soo-Yeon, the torn photograph scattered on the floor. "You ungrateful wretch!" Madame Kang's voice was ice. "After everything we've done for you, you attack my precious daughter?" "I didn't. She was destroying my mother's picture." "Silence!" Madame Kang grabbed Soo-Yeon by the hair and dragged her to her feet. "You will learn your place if it's the last thing I do." What followed was one of the worst beatings Soo-Yeon had ever endured. By the time Madame Kang was finished, Soo-Yeon could barely stand. Her lip was split, her cheek was swelling, and she was fairly certain at least one of her ribs was cracked. 3 days in the closet, Madame Kang declared. "No food, no water. Maybe that will teach you to keep your filthy hands to yourself." As they dragged her down the stairs and shoved her into the tiny storage space that had become her prison, Soo-Yeon clutched the torn pieces of her mother's photograph against her chest. Through swollen eyes, she looked up at the 2 women who had destroyed her life. "Someday," she whispered, so quietly that only she could hear, "someday you'll pay for this." They locked the door and left her in the darkness. 3 weeks later, Soo-Yeon found herself standing in a cramped legal office in Jongno, clutching a letter that had arrived at the Kang mansion addressed specifically to her. She had almost thrown it away, assuming it was another bill or scam, but something about the heavy cream envelope and the official seal had made her hesitate. She'd hidden it in her apron and waited until Madame Kang and Yoo-jin left for their weekly spa day before sneaking out, her body still aching from her last punishment. The lawyer, an elderly man with kind eyes behind thick glasses, studied her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She knew how she looked, thin, bruised, dressed in clothes that were more rags than garments. She had tried to cover the worst of her injuries with makeup, but there was only so much concealer could hide. "Miss Soo-Yeon, I must ask, do you have any identification? Any documents that prove who you are?" I have my national ID card." She pulled it from her worn bag with trembling fingers. "But I don't understand. Your letter said there was an urgent matter regarding my inheritance. There must be some mistake. My father left everything to his wife. The will was very clear." The lawyer, Mr. Park, shook his head slowly, his expression a mixture of compassion and barely contained excitement. "The will you're referring to was for Kang Jae-won's estate, but I'm not here about him." He paused, adjusting his glasses as if steeling himself for what came next. Miss Soo-Yeon, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but I need you to listen carefully, because what I'm about to say will change your life forever. Soo-Yeon's heart began to race. Despite everything, the abuse, the starvation, the beatings, hope flickered in her chest like a candle flame in a storm. I don't understand. What could possibly... Kang Jae-won was not your biological father. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Soo-Yeon gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white. What? That's impossible. I have his family photos. I grew up calling him Appa. He held me when I cried. He taught me to ride a bicycle. He was a good man who took you in as an infant when you were abandoned at his doorstep, Mr. Park continued gently. He loved you as his own daughter and never told you the truth because he wanted to protect you. But now, he slid a folder across the desk with reverent care. Now, the truth must come out, because there are people who have been searching for you for 28 years. With shaking hands, Soo-Yeon opened the folder. Inside were documents, photographs, DNA test results dated just 2 weeks ago. As she scanned the papers, her confusion only deepened. There were pictures of a beautiful hospital, a nursery, 2 infants in bassinets. There were copies of police reports, private investigator files, newspaper clippings about a kidnapping that had shocked the nation. Choi family? Chairman Choi Sung-ho? She looked up at the lawyer, her voice barely above a whisper. The Choi Group, the largest conglomerate in South Korea? You can't be serious. Your biological father, Mr. Park confirmed. 28 years ago, you were stolen from the hospital nursery at Seoul National University Hospital the day you were born. Chairman Choi and his wife searched for you for years, spending hundreds of millions of won, hiring the best investigators in the world. They never gave up hope. And then, 3 months ago, a private investigator finally found a lead, a nurse who had been paid to switch the babies. She was dying of cancer and wanted to confess before she met her maker. Soo-Yeon's mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. Switch? You mean, there was another baby? You were switched with another infant. The nurse took you from the Choi family nursery and replaced you with a baby girl who had been born to a woman who died in childbirth that same night. The Chois raised that child as their own for 28 years, believing she was their daughter. Meanwhile, you were left at Kang Jae-won's doorstep in a basket, with nothing but a blanket and a note asking him to give you a good life. The pieces were falling into place, but Soo-Yeon couldn't quite believe it. It was too much like a drama on television, too perfectly dramatic to be real. So the Choi family's daughter, she's not really their daughter? She's the child of some woman who died in childbirth? Her name is Choi Mi-ran. She has enjoyed 28 years of privilege, wealth, love, and opportunity that rightfully belonged to you. Mr. Park's expression hardened with barely contained anger. And when confronted with the DNA evidence 3 weeks ago, she and her mother, Mrs. Choi, attempted to destroy the proof. They've been trying to suppress this information to protect their position, their status, their access to the Choi fortune. Her mother. You mean the chairman's wife knows the truth? Mr. Park nodded gravely. Mrs. Choi, her name is Madame BEGS, apparently began to suspect something years ago, when Mi-ran's blood type didn't match either parent's. A simple biology lesson that should have unraveled everything. Instead of investigating, instead of searching for the truth, she buried the evidence and silenced anyone who asked questions. She was afraid of losing her status, her marriage, the life she had built on a foundation of lies. When the chairman discovered the truth from the dying nurse's confession, Madame BEGS tried to pay her off, offered her millions of won to take her secrets to the grave. But the nurse wanted to clear her conscience before she died. She provided the DNA samples that led us to you. Soo-Yeon sat in stunned silence. Her entire life had been a lie. Not just the last 3 years of abuse, but everything. Her identity, her family, her place in the world. All of it had been stolen from her before she even took her first breath by a greedy nurse and a desperate mother who valued money over morality. "Chairman Choi would like to meet you," Mr. Park said softly. "He's been waiting 28 years for this moment. He never stopped believing you were alive somewhere, that someday he would find you. He hired investigators year after year, kept your nursery intact in the family home, refused to give up even when everyone told him it was hopeless." She should have felt joy. Somewhere inside her, there was probably a glimmer of hope trying to ignite, a flame of possibility that her suffering might finally have meaning. But after 3 years of having every good thing in her life systematically destroyed, Soo-Yeon found it hard to believe that anything good was waiting for her. Good things didn't happen to her. That was the lesson the Kangs had taught her every single day. "Why should I trust any of this?" she finally asked. "Why should I trust you? For all I know, this is some elaborate scam, some way to extort money from the Choi family using a desperate woman as a pawn." Mr. Park smiled sadly, as if he had expected this response. "Because you have nothing left to lose. And because everything I've told you can be verified with a simple DNA test that you can administer yourself with witnesses of your choosing." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a card. "This is Chairman Choi's private number. Call him, meet him. Let him prove to you that you are his daughter. And then, Miss Soo-Yeon, let him help you reclaim everything that was stolen from you." Soo-Yeon took the card. Her fingers brushed over the embossed letters. Choi Sung-ho, Chairman, Choi Group. The name that appeared in every business magazine, on every news channel. The man who controlled a corporate empire worth billions of dollars, who employed tens of thousands of people, who influenced the direction of the entire South Korean economy. Her father. She had a father, a real father, one who had never stopped looking for her, who had spent a fortune trying to find her, who had kept her nursery intact for 28 years because he couldn't bear to give up hope. For the first time in 3 years, Soo-Yeon felt something other than despair. She felt rage, white-hot, consuming rage at everyone who had stolen her life from her. The nurse who had switched the babies, Madame Bayek who had covered up the truth, Miran who had lived Soo-Yeon's life in luxury while Soo-Yeon suffered, the Kang family who had abused her thinking she was nobody, that she had no one to protect her. They were all going to pay. The Kang family mansion felt different when Soo-Yeon returned that evening. The marble floors she had scrubbed on her knees for 3 years now seemed like the floors of a prison she was about to escape. The crystal chandeliers that she had dusted hundreds of times now sparkled with the promise of a different future. The walls that had witnessed her humiliation now seemed to whisper of coming justice. She moved through her evening duties with mechanical precision, her mind racing with possibilities. She had called the number on the card from a public phone, her hands shaking so badly she had almost dropped it. A warm, trembling voice had answered. A man who had wept when he heard her name, who had begged her to come see him, who had told her over and over again how sorry he was, how much he had missed her, how he would spend the rest of his life making things right. Soo-Yeon Ah, he had called her, using the affectionate form of her name that she hadn't heard since her adoptive father died. "My daughter, my baby girl. I've been waiting for this call for 28 years. Tomorrow, she would meet her real father. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would begin planning her revenge. Soo-Yeon. Yoojin's shrill voice cut through her thoughts like nails on a chalkboard. Where is my Hermes scarf? I specifically told you to have it cleaned and ready by tonight. Are you deaf as well as stupid? Soo-Yeon walked into Yoojin's bedroom, a room larger than the entire apartment Soo-Yeon had been forced to sleep in, a converted storage closet beside the kitchen that didn't even have a proper bed, just a thin mat on a concrete floor. Yoojin was sprawled on her silk sheets like a princess, her phone in one hand and a glass of expensive wine in the other, surrounded by shopping bags from the finest boutiques in Seoul. "The scarf is in your closet, Miss Soo-Yeon. Top shelf, left side, wrapped in tissue paper exactly as you requested." "Then get it for me. Do you expect me to get up?" Soo-Yeon didn't even look at her, too absorbed in whatever was on her phone. "Honestly, you're the worst servant we've ever had. My mother should have thrown you out years ago." Soo-Yeon retrieved the scarf silently. As she handed it to Soo-Yeon, the younger woman grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, finally deigning to look at her with those cold, cruel eyes. "You know," Soo-Yeon said, her lips curling into a smile that held no warmth, "you've been acting strange today. Almost like you think you're better than us. Like you've forgotten your place." She squeezed harder, her manicured nails digging into Soo-Yeon's skin, drawing small crescents of blood. "Let me remind you of your place. You are nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing. Your father is dead. Your mother is dead. You have no family, no friends, no future. You exist because we allow you to exist. You breathe because we allow you to breathe. Never forget that." 3 years ago, those words would have made Soo-Yeon cry. Even 3 weeks ago, they might have hurt, might have made her feel the crushing weight of her own worthlessness. But now, knowing what she knew, Soo-Yeon felt something entirely different as she looked at the spoiled woman who had tormented her for so long. She felt pity, and something that might have been dark amusement. "Of course, Miss Soo-Yeon," she said calmly, her voice steady. "I know exactly what I am." The next morning, Soo-Yeon stood in front of the Choi Group headquarters in Yeouido, one of the tallest and most impressive buildings in Seoul's financial district. The glass and steel structure soared into the sky like a monument to power and success, its surface reflecting the morning sun in blinding patterns. Her reflection in the glass doors showed a thin woman in worn clothes, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face pale from years of poor nutrition, and marked with the fading bruises of recent punishments. She looked nothing like the heir to a billion-dollar empire. But appearances could be deceiving. That was a lesson she had learned well. A man in an expensive suit approached her the moment she entered the lobby, as if he had been waiting for her specifically. "Miss Soo-Yeon, I'm Secretary Han. Chairman Choi has been waiting for you since 6 this morning. He couldn't sleep at all last night. Please, follow me." The elevator ride to the top floor felt like ascending to another world. Every floor that passed was another step away from the life she had known. Another step toward something she couldn't quite comprehend. The numbers climbed higher and higher, 30, 40, 50, until finally they reached the penthouse level, the chairman's private domain. When the elevator doors opened, Soo-Yeon found herself in an elegant hallway, lined with artwork and fresh flowers, paintings that she recognized from her art history studies, works by masters that belonged in museums, not private collections. Everything spoke of wealth beyond imagination, of power that could move mountains. At the end of the hall, a set of massive oak doors stood open, revealing a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city of Seoul. The Han River glittered in the distance, and beyond it, the mountains that cradled the ancient city. And there, standing by those windows with his back to her, was a man in his late 60s with silver hair and broad shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Chairman Choi?" Secretary Han announced, his voice thick with emotion. "Your daughter is here." The man turned, and in that moment, Soo-Yeon saw her own eyes looking back at her. The same almond shape, the same deep brown color, the same hint of sadness that she had always seen in her reflection, even as a child, even before she understood why. Soo-Yeon. His voice broke on her name, cracking with 28 years of grief and hope and desperate love. "My daughter, my baby girl, my little star." Little star. Her adoptive father had called her that too. Had he known? Had he somehow known the connection? Chairman Choi crossed the room in 3 long strides and stopped just in front of her, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch her face, as if afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. Tears were already streaming down his weathered cheeks, carving paths through the distinguished lines of his face. "You have your mother's nose," he whispered, his voice breaking. "And my eyes. God, I can't believe. 28 years. 28 years I've been searching for you, praying for you, hoping against hope that you were alive somewhere, that someone was taking care of you, that someday... He couldn't finish. His composure crumbled completely, and this powerful man, this titan of industry who commanded billions, fell to his knees before her and wept like a child. Soo-Yeon found that she couldn't speak. All the walls she had built over 3 years of abuse, all the emotional armor she had constructed to survive, began to crumble in the face of this man's raw, unfiltered love. No one had looked at her like this since her adoptive father died. No one had loved her like this, so completely and unconditionally. "I'm sorry," Chairman Choi continued through his tears, gripping her hands like a lifeline. "I'm so sorry we didn't find you sooner. I'm sorry for everything you've suffered. I failed you as a father before I even had the chance to be one. I should have protected you. I should have found you. I should have..." "It wasn't your fault," Soo-Yeon finally managed, her own eyes filling with tears. "You were a victim too. We were both victims." "No." He shook his head firmly, looking up at her with an expression of fierce determination. "I was a victim, but you were a child. An innocent child who deserved to grow up loved and protected, surrounded by everything the world had to offer. Instead, you were..." He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't speak aloud the horrors that Mr. Park had revealed. "Mr. Park told me about the Kang family, about what they've done to you, about the beatings, the starvation, the closet." Soo-Yeon stiffened instinctively. The survival instincts she had developed told her not to show weakness, not to admit to the abuse, not to give anyone ammunition to use against her. "I survived." "You shouldn't have had to just survive." Chairman Choi rose to his feet and took her hands in his grip warm and strong. "You should have thrived. You should have had the best education, the best clothes, the best everything. You should have traveled the world, learned from the finest teachers, been surrounded by people who adored you. And now, if you'll let me, I want to give you all of it. Not to make up for the past. Nothing can ever do that. But to give you the future you deserve." He led her to a leather sofa and sat beside her, still holding her hands as if afraid to let go, as if she might vanish if he released her for even a moment. "There are things you need to know," he said carefully, his expression darkening. "About the woman who has been living as my daughter for 28 years. About my wife. About the conspiracy that stole your life." "Madame Baek." Chairman Choi nodded, his jaw tightening with barely suppressed rage. "I loved her once. Or I thought I did. She was beautiful, charming, everything a young man thinks he wants in a wife. We were happy. Or I believed we were happy, especially after Miran was born. I thought I had everything. A successful business, a beautiful wife, a precious daughter." His voice hardened. "But when I discovered the truth 3 months ago, when that nurse finally confessed on her deathbed, I realized that my entire marriage, my entire family, has been built on lies. She's known for years," Soo-Yeon said. It wasn't a question. "Since Miran was 15, 13 years ago." Chairman Choi's voice was bitter. "She discovered the blood type discrepancy during a routine medical exam. Miran is type AB. I'm type O. Her mother is type A. It's biologically impossible for us to have a type AB child. Even a first-year medical student would know that." He paused, struggling with his emotions. "Instead of telling me, instead of trying to find our real daughter, she covered it up. She bribed the doctor. She destroyed the medical records. She did everything in her power to make sure no one ever discovered the truth. Because she was afraid of losing everything, Soo-Yeon said quietly. Because she cares more about status and money than truth or family. Because her position, her lifestyle, her identity as Mrs. Choi, those things mattered more to her than justice or honesty or the suffering of an innocent child. Chairman Choi's voice rose with anger. When I confronted her with the DNA evidence, she didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She tried to bribe the investigator who found you. She offered him 50 million won to destroy the files and disappear. When that didn't work, she tried to have the files stolen from his office. What about Miran? Did she know? She knows now. And instead of shame, instead of remorse for living a stolen life, she and her mother have been working together to keep you hidden, to prevent you from ever learning who you really are. Chairman Choi's expression was thunderous. They hired people to watch you, to make sure you never discovered the truth. They've been tracking your movements, monitoring your communications. They were planning to... He stopped himself, seeming to decide that some details were too dark to share. Soo-Yeon absorbed this information. The betrayal wasn't surprising. After 3 years with the Kang family, very little surprised her when it came to human cruelty. But the scale of it was breathtaking. A conspiracy spanning decades. Millions of won spent on cover-ups and bribes. Lives destroyed, futures stolen, all to protect one woman's fraudulent position. What do you want to do about it? She asked quietly. Chairman Choi studied her face, seeming to search for something in her expression. What do you want to do? It was such a simple question. But in that moment, Soo-Yeon realized that no one had asked her what she wanted in 3 years. The Kang family had taken everything from her. Her possessions, her dignity, her voice, her agency. They had treated her like an object, a tool to be used and discarded, something less than human. Every day they had told her what to do, what to wear, what to eat, or more often what she wasn't allowed to eat. They had made every decision for her, had stripped away every piece of her autonomy until she was nothing but a shadow. And now, here was a man who possessed more power than almost anyone in South Korea, asking her what she wanted. Soo-Yeon thought about Madame Kang's slaps, the sting of her palm against Soo-Yeon's cheek that had become as familiar as breathing. About Yoo-jin's cruelty, the casual sadism of a spoiled child who had never been told no. About the storage closet she slept in, the concrete floor that made her bones ache, the darkness that had become her only companion. About the meals she was denied, while they feasted feet away from her hungry eyes. About the thousands of small humiliations that had accumulated over 3 years into a mountain of suffering. Then she thought about Madame Bayek and Miran, the woman who had known the truth for 13 years and buried it, the imposter who had lived Soo-Yeon's life in luxury while Soo-Yeon suffered in obscurity. 28 years of designer clothes, of 5-star vacations, of the best education money could buy, of being loved and cherished and protected, all of it built on a foundation of theft and lies. I want them to pay, she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. All of them. I want them to experience even a fraction of what they did to me, of what they stole from me. And then I want to build a life so magnificent, so impossibly successful, that they'll spend the rest of their miserable existences regretting every single moment they made me suffer. Chairman Choi smiled, a fierce, proud smile that transformed his face from distinguished to almost dangerous. That's my daughter, he said. Now let me tell you about my plan. Over the next 3 months, Soo-Yeon underwent a transformation that would have seemed impossible just 1 year ago. Chairman Choi installed her in a luxury penthouse in Hanam-dong, one of Seoul's most exclusive neighborhoods. The apartment was larger than the entire Kang mansion, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city and furnishings that belonged in a design magazine. The first time she walked through the front door, Soo-Yeon stood frozen in the entryway for nearly 10 minutes. The living room alone was bigger than the entire storage closet she had called home for 3 years. The kitchen had appliances she didn't know how to use. The bathroom had a bathtub deep enough to swim in, and the bedroom had a real bed. A king-sized bed with silk sheets and down pillows and a mattress so soft it felt like sleeping on clouds. She sat on the edge of that bed and cried for hours. Not tears of sadness, but tears of release. 3 years of fear and pain and degradation poured out of her in waves that seemed endless. She cried for the girl she had been before the Kangs destroyed her innocence. She cried for the woman she might have been if she had grown up as the Choi heiress. She cried for all the nights she had spent shivering on cold concrete, dreaming of a moment exactly like this one. When the tears finally stopped, Soo-Yeon stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city that sparkled below her. Seoul stretched out in every direction, millions of lives unfolding in millions of ways. Somewhere out there, Madam Kang and Yoo-jin were probably enjoying another evening of luxury that they had stolen from her. Somewhere else, Madam Baek and Miran were sleeping soundly, secure in their belief that their secrets would never be discovered. They had no idea what was coming. "I survived," Soo-Yeon whispered to the night. "And now, I'm going to make you all pay." For the first week, Soo-Yeon could barely sleep. She would lie awake in her silk sheets, real silk, not the polyester blend she had been forced to wash for Yoo-jin, staring at the ceiling and waiting for someone to burst through the door and drag her back to her closet. The bed was too soft. The room was too quiet. The food was too plentiful. Her body, conditioned by 3 years of deprivation, couldn't process abundance. But gradually, with the help of therapists and doctors, and the patient love of her father, Soo-Yeon began to heal. She ate regular meals for the first time in years, and watched her body transform from skeletal to healthy. She exercised with a personal trainer who helped her rebuild muscle that had wasted away. She worked with a nutritionist who explained that her hair would grow back thick and shiny once her body had the vitamins it needed. And she learned. Oh, how she learned. Chairman Choi personally taught her about the Choi Group, about business strategy, about the cutthroat world of corporate Korea. They spent hours in his office, reviewing financial statements and market analyses, discussing acquisitions and partnerships, debating strategy until long after the sun had set. "You have a natural talent for this," he told her one evening as they reviewed quarterly reports together. "You understand people. You see through their masks, through their pretenses, straight to their true motivations. That's a rare gift in business and in life." "I learned to read people to survive," Soo-Yeon admitted. "In the Kang house, if I could anticipate what they wanted before they asked, sometimes I could avoid being punished. I learned to read every expression, every tone of voice, every shift in body language. I had to stay alive." Chairman Choi's expression flickered with pain at this reminder of what his daughter had endured. "That skill will serve you well now, but for very different reasons. No more surviving, Soo-Yeon. From now on, you thrive." Meanwhile, they gathered evidence. It was painstaking work, requiring the coordination of lawyers, investigators, and forensic accountants from 3 different countries. Documents showing Madame Bayek's attempts to bribe investigators had to be authenticated and translated. Recordings of phone calls where Miran threatened staff members who knew too much had to be enhanced and transcribed. Financial records showing how the 2 women had been siphoning money from Choi Group accounts into secret offshore funds required months of analysis to trace. Secretary Han became Soo-Yeon's right hand in this effort, working 18-hour days to compile the mountain of evidence they would need. He had been with Chairman Choi for over 20 years, and had always suspected that something was wrong with Madame Baek and Miran. Small inconsistencies, strange behaviors, secrets that didn't quite add up. Now, finally, he understood what he had been sensing all along. "The scope of it is breathtaking," he told Soo-Yeon during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "They didn't just steal your identity. They built an entire system of lies and bribes and cover-ups to protect that theft. There are at least a dozen people who knew the truth and were paid to keep quiet. Doctors, nurses, lawyers, accountants. Every single one of them chose money over morality, and every single one of them will face consequences, Soo-Yeon replied. This isn't just about me, Secretary Han. This is about sending a message. No matter how rich you are, no matter how powerful you think you are, the truth will always find its way to the light. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Madam Kang had been involved in her husband's death, exactly as Soo-Yeon had always suspected. Phone records showed that she had been in contact with a known criminal organization in the weeks before his fatal accident. Bank transfers revealed payments to unknown individuals, and a witness who had been too afraid to speak at the time finally came forward, willing to testify that she had seen someone tamper with Kang Jae-won's car the morning he died. When Soo-Yeon learned the truth about her adoptive father's murder, she locked herself in her room for 3 days. The grief was different this time, not just for the loss of him, but for the knowledge that he had been taken from her deliberately, killed by the same woman who would go on to torment Soo-Yeon for 3 years. If Madam Kang had never entered their lives, Kang Jae-won would still be alive. He would have eventually learned the truth about Soo-Yeon's origins. He might have helped her find her real family. Everything could have been different. But grief, Soo-Yeon had learned, was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not yet. First, she had to destroy everyone who had destroyed her. The mourning could come later. They've been planning for this day, Secretary Han reported during one of their strategy meetings. Madame Bayek and Miss Miran have stolen approximately 2 billion won over the past decade. Accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. They were prepared to disappear if necessary, to run and start new lives with money that doesn't belong to them. Then we make sure they have nowhere to disappear to, Soo-Yeon said calmly, her voice steady despite the rage burning inside her. Freeze the accounts. Notify the authorities in every jurisdiction. Make sure that everyone they stole is identified and locked away where they can never touch it. Chairman Choi watched his daughter with barely concealed admiration. In just 3 months, the broken woman who had walked into his office had transformed into something extraordinary. Not hard. He had been worried she might become hard, might let her suffering make her cruel, but strong, strategic, graceful in her anger, devastating in her precision. If you're feeling the same satisfaction I am right now, imagining what's about to happen to these people who deserve everything coming to them, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. The Choi Group annual gala is in 2 weeks, Chairman Choi said. Every powerful person in Seoul will be there. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities. I think it's time to introduce my real daughter to the world. Soo-Yeon looked up from the documents she was reviewing, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. I'd like that. But first, there's something I need to do. An old debt I need to collect. The Kang family mansion looked exactly the same as it had 3 months ago, when Soo-Yeon left for what everyone assumed was another errand. The same marble floors she had scrubbed until her knees bled. The same crystal chandeliers she had polished until her arms ached. The same oppressive atmosphere of cruelty dressed up in luxury. But Soo-Yeon was not the same woman who had walked out that door. She arrived in a chauffeured black Mercedes, the kind of car that Madam Kang always dreamed of owning, but could never quite afford. Her chauffeur, a dignified man named Mr. Kim, who had worked for the Choi family for 30 years, opened her door with a respectful bow. Soo-Yeon stepped out wearing a Chanel suit that cost more than Madam Kang's entire jewelry collection. The fabric was soft against her healed skin, the cut perfect for her now healthy figure. Her hair, once dull and lifeless, now gleamed with health, styled in elegant waves that framed her face. Her skin glowed with the benefits of proper nutrition and the most expensive skincare money could buy. Her posture radiated the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. When the housekeeper, kind Mrs. Lee, who had always slipped Soo-Yeon extra food when she could, who had bandaged her wounds and wept at her bruises, opened the door, her eyes went wide with shock. "Miss Soo-Yeon, is that really you?" "Hello, Mrs. Lee." Soo-Yeon smiled warmly. genuinely happy to see the one person in this house who had shown her kindness. "I'm here to see Madam Kang and Miss Yoo-jin. Are they home?" "They're in the sitting room, but, Miss Soo-Yeon, what happened to you? Where have you been? They've been telling everyone that you stole money and ran away. They filed a police report. They said a lot of things, I'm sure. They always did." Soo-Yeon reached out and took the older woman's hand. "Mrs. Lee, I want you to know. The things that happened to me in this house were not your fault. You were kind to me when no one else was. I won't forget that." Mrs. Lee's eyes filled with tears. "Miss Soo-Yeon, I should have done more. I should have called someone, reported them." "You did what you could. That's all anyone can ask." Soo-Yeon squeezed her hand. "Now, I think it's time I had a conversation with the ladies of the house. Would you please let them know I'm here?" "Of course, miss, but—" Mrs. Lee hesitated. "Be careful. They've been in terrible moods lately. Something about their investments going bad." Soo-Yeon smiled. "Yes, I imagine their investments have been performing quite poorly. I wonder why that could be." She walked past the stunned housekeeper and made her way to the sitting room, her heels clicking against the marble with each confident step. The sound echoed through the mansion like a pronouncement, like the footsteps of justice finally arriving at its destination. Through the half-open doors, she could hear Madam Kang and Yoo-jin's voices, complaining about something. The unfairness of their financial troubles, the incompetence of their advisors, the cruelty of a world that had suddenly stopped giving them everything they wanted. Soo-Yeon pushed the doors open wide and stepped inside. The room fell silent. Madam Kang's teacup froze halfway to her lips, her face going pale beneath her expensive makeup. Yoo-jin's mouth dropped open in an expression that would have been comical if it weren't so satisfying, her phone slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers. "Good afternoon," Soo-Yeon said pleasantly. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "You." Madam Kang recovered first, her face contorting with fury as she slammed her teacup down on the table. "How dare you come back here after what you did? Where is the money you stole? Where have you been hiding? The police have been looking for you for months." "Stolen money?" Soo-Yeon raised an eyebrow, her expression one of mild curiosity. "I wasn't aware I had access to any money worth stealing. From what I recall, you made sure I didn't have a single one to my name. You took my clothes, my jewelry, my photographs. Everything I owned became yours the moment my father died. Or should I say, the moment you helped him die." The color drained from Madam Kang's face completely. "I don't know what you're talking about. Your father's death was an accident. The police ruled what you paid them to rule. But we'll get to that later." Soo-Yeon walked further into the room, taking her time, savoring every moment. "For now, let's discuss the present situation. Specifically, the situation where I own this house." "What?" Yoo-jin jumped to her feet. "That's impossible. This house is worth $12 million, Soo-Yeon confirmed, pulling a document from her designer handbag. "I paid cash. The transaction completed this morning at 9 o'clock. Your mother, the previous owner, was quite eager to sell once she discovered that her late husband's financial records were being audited by the National Tax Service." She smiled. "Did you know that Kang Jae-won's company was embezzled dry in the months after his death? Millions of won, redirected to offshore accounts controlled by his loving widow and stepdaughter. The auditors were very interested in those transactions." "Those are lies!" Madam Kang shrieked. "We inherited that money fairly. The will—" "The forged will, you mean?" Soo-Yeon tossed another folder onto the coffee table. "I have copies of the real will, the one your lawyers conveniently lost. The one that left everything to me, with you as trustee until I came of age. The one you replaced with a forgery that gave you full control of the estate." She let the words hang in the air. "The forensic accountants were very thorough. They traced every transaction, every bribe, every forged signature. My lawyers have copies. So does the prosecutor's office. Madam Kang's confident facade crumbled like wet paper. Who are you? The Soo-Yeon I knew couldn't have done this. The Soo-Yeon I knew was weak, pathetic. The Soo-Yeon you knew was a victim, Soo-Yeon interrupted, her voice cold. A woman you beat, starved, and degraded for 3 years because you thought she had no one to protect her, no one to avenge her. But here's what you didn't know, Madam Kang. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on her former tormentor with predatory intensity. I was never Kang Jae-won's biological daughter. I was the stolen daughter of Chairman Choi Sung-ho, the most powerful man in South Korea. And now I've come to collect what's owed. The silence that followed was so complete that Soo-Yeon could hear her own heartbeat. Madam Kang swayed on her feet, her face cycling through expressions of disbelief, fear, and dawning horror. Yoo-jin simply stared, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. That's impossible, Madam Kang finally stammered. Chairman Choi's daughter is Miran. Everyone knows. Everyone knows a lie that's been told for 28 years, but DNA tests don't lie. Soo-Yeon pulled out one final document, a summary of the DNA analysis that had changed everything. I am Choi Soo-Yeon, sole biological heir to the Choi Group fortune. And you, Madam Kang, have spent 3 years abusing the daughter of the most powerful family in Korea. I didn't know. Madam Kang's voice rose to a shriek. How could I have known? You were just some orphan your father took in out of charity. A burden, a charity case. Just some orphan. Soo-Yeon repeated the words slowly, savoring their bitter irony. Is that how you justified treating me worse than an animal? Because you thought I was nobody? Because you thought no one would ever come looking for me? No one would ever hold you accountable? She walked to the window that looked out over the garden she had been forced to tend on her hands and knees in the scorching summer heat, while they watched from this very room and laughed. Let me tell you something, Madam Kang. It doesn't matter if I was an orphan or a princess. No human being deserves to be treated the way you treated me. The beatings, the starvation, the isolation, the constant, relentless cruelty. Her voice hardened to steel. But since you only seem to understand power and status, since human decency means nothing to you unless it's backed by money and connections, let me make this perfectly clear. She turned back to face them, her expression cold as winter. You will vacate this property within 48 hours. You will take nothing but your personal clothes. Every piece of jewelry, every designer bag, every stick of furniture that you purchased with stolen money stays. My lawyers will be filing criminal charges for embezzlement, fraud, theft, and, she paused, accessory to murder. Yes, we're reopening the investigation into my father's death. The real investigation this time. You can't do this, Yoo-jin screamed, finally finding her voice. You're just a servant, a worthless, pathetic... I can do whatever I want. Soo-Yeon cut her off. I could buy and sell your entire life 1,000 times over. I could destroy you so completely that no one would even remember your names. But I'm not going to do that. She paused, letting them hope for just a moment. I'm going to let you live with the knowledge of what you did. Every time you struggle to pay rent in whatever rat-infested apartment you end up in. Every time someone refuses to hire you because of your criminal record. Every time you look in the mirror and see what you've become. You'll remember how you treated the helpless girl who was in your power. And you'll know that this is your punishment. Not prison. Not death. Just the slow, grinding misery of a life without privilege, without status, without anyone to look down on. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, one more thing. The charity gala for the Choi Group is next week. Madame Baek and Miran will be there, expecting to maintain their positions as the chairman's wife and daughter. A small, dangerous smile played at her lips. They're in for quite a surprise. I thought you might enjoy knowing that. After all, misery loves company, doesn't it? And with that, Choi Soo-Yeon walked out of the Kang mansion for the last time, leaving two stunned, broken women in her wake. The Seoul Grand Hyatt ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland for the Choi Group's annual gala. Crystal snowflakes hung from the ceiling like frozen tears. Thousands of white roses adorned every surface, their fragrance filling the air. And the who's who of Korean high society glittered like stars in their designer gowns and bespoke suits, each one more elegant than the last. Madame BEGS surveyed her domain with the satisfaction of a queen confident in her power. As the wife of Chairman Choi for nearly 30 years, she had spent months planning this event. Every detail had been perfect. The flowers from the Netherlands, the champagne from France, the musicians from the Vienna Philharmonic. Every guest had been carefully selected, every placement arranged for maximum social advantage. This was her moment to shine, to remind Seoul's elite exactly who held power in this city. Beside her, Miran accepted compliments with the practiced grace of someone who had spent her entire life being adored. At 28, she was considered one of the most eligible bachelorettes in South Korea, beautiful with her designer dress and perfect makeup, wealthy beyond most people's dreams, connected to every powerful family in the country. The future of the Choi Group, or so everyone believed. "Darling, you look absolutely stunning," a society matron gushed. "That Valentino gown is divine. The color is perfect for your complexion." "Thank you, Auntie." Miran smiled her most charming smile, the one she had practiced in front of mirrors for years. "Mother helped me choose it. She has such impeccable taste." Madame Beck preened at the compliment. Yes, everything was perfect. She had handled the situation with the investigator, a substantial payment to ensure his silence, a few carefully placed threats to ensure his cooperation. That dying nurse had caused so much trouble, but her deathbed confession had been successfully contained. The real Choi daughter, wherever she was, would never be found now. "Where is the chairman?" someone asked. "I haven't seen him all evening." Madame BEGS' smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Her husband had been distant lately, spending long hours at the office, avoiding her questions, looking at her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between contempt and careful planning. She had attributed it to stress, to work, to the natural cooling that happened in any long marriage. She had no idea that her entire world was about to collapse. At exactly 8 o'clock, the orchestra fell silent, the massive crystal chandeliers dimmed to half their brightness. A single spotlight illuminated the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom, creating a dramatic stage for what was to come. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice announced over the speakers, "please welcome your host for this evening, Chairman Choi Sung-ho." Polite applause rippled through the crowd as Chairman Choi descended the stairs, resplendent in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He moved to the center of the ballroom, where a microphone had been set up, his expression one of controlled intensity. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice warm but with an edge of steel beneath the pleasantries. "For 30 years, the Choi Group Annual Gala has been a celebration of our company, our achievements, and our future. But tonight, I want to do something different. Tonight, I want to talk about family." Madame BEGS smiled and took Miran's arm, preparing to join her husband on the stage. This was the part where he would call them up, where he would talk about how grateful he was for their support, where he would present Miran as the future of the company. "Family is everything to me," Chairman Choi continued, "which is why, when I discovered that my family had been built on a foundation of lies, I was devastated." The smile froze on Madame BEGS' face. 28 years ago, my wife and I believed we had a daughter, a beautiful baby girl who I thought was the greatest gift of my life. I held her in my arms and made promises to protect her, to love her, to give her everything. Chairman Choi's voice hardened. But 3 months ago, I learned the truth. The child I raised was not my biological daughter. She was switched at birth, replaced by another infant, while my real daughter was stolen and abandoned on a stranger's doorstep. Murmurs swept through the crowd like wind through wheat. Madame Baek felt the eyes of every guest in the room turning toward her. I also learned, Chairman Choi continued, that my wife has known about this switch for 13 years. She discovered the truth when our supposed daughter was 15, and rather than tell me, rather than help me find my real child, she covered it up. She bribed doctors. She destroyed evidence. She spent millions of won to make sure the truth never came out. Sung-ho, Madame Baek's voice cut through the whispers. What are you doing? This is absurd. Our daughter is right here. She has always been our daughter. Your daughter, perhaps. Chairman Choi looked at her with an expression of cold contempt. Not mine. DNA tests conducted by 3 independent laboratories have confirmed it. Miran is not biologically related to me in any way. She is the daughter of a woman who died in childbirth 28 years ago, a woman who was paid to give up her child as part of a scheme to steal mine. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. Miran's perfect composure cracked, her face going pale beneath her expertly applied makeup. But that's not the end of the story, Chairman Choi said, because I did find my real daughter. After 28 years of searching, of never giving up hope, of keeping her nursery intact in our family home, I finally found her. He smiled, and for the first time that evening, warmth entered his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to my daughter, my true heir, the future of the Choi Group. Please welcome Choi Soo-Yeon. The spotlight swung to the top of the grand staircase, and there she stood. If what you're feeling right now is the same anticipation I felt when I heard this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single moment of what happens next. Soo-Yeon descended the stairs like a queen returning to claim her throne after a long exile. Her gown was a masterpiece of ruby red silk that seemed to float around her with every step, a color that symbolized power and passion and the blood of her enemies. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, the legendary Choi family jewels that had not been worn in public for decades, pieces that Madame Baek had always coveted but been told were reserved for special occasions. This was that special occasion. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon that showed off her graceful neck. Her makeup was subtle but flawless, highlighting features that were unmistakably Chairman Choi's. His eyes, his determined chin, his proud bearing. Her posture radiated confidence and grace, and something that might have been triumph. But it was her expression that commanded attention. Eyes that swept across the stunned crowd and settled on Madame Baek and Miran with an expression of calm, absolute triumph. The look of someone who had waited 28 years for this moment and intended to savor every second. She reached the bottom of the stairs and took her father's arm. Together, they faced the crowd like generals surveying a conquered battlefield. For 28 years, Soo-Yeon said, her voice clear and strong, I didn't know who I was. I was raised by a kind man who found me abandoned on his doorstep. He loved me as his own, and when he died, I was left at the mercy of his wife and stepdaughter. Her voice remained steady, but steel crept into her words. For 3 years, they treated me as a servant. They beat me. They starved me. They locked me in closets for days at a time. They told me I was worthless, that no one would ever love me, that I deserved every bit of their cruelty. She paused, letting the words sink in. The crowd was utterly silent. But the truth has a way of coming out, and now I'm exactly where I belong. Madame Baek pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with fury and desperation. This is a lie, a scheme to steal what belongs to my daughter. I won't allow this charade to continue for one more second. You won't allow? Soo-Yeon interrupted, her voice soft but deadly. You don't allow anything anymore, Madame Baek. You're not the chairman's wife anymore. You're the woman who helped cover up the theft of his real daughter and tried to install an imposter in her place. You're an accomplice to kidnapping, fraud, and embezzlement. She stepped closer to the older woman, and though Soo-Yeon was younger and had spent years being diminished, It was Madame BEGS who shrank back. I know about the bribes you paid to silence the nurse. I know about the evidence you destroyed. I know about the 2 billion won you and Miran have been stealing from the company for years. Your escape fund in case the truth ever came out. Soo-Yeon's smile was beautiful and terrible. The prosecutors know too. They're waiting outside with arrest warrants. No! Miran screamed, her perfect composure shattering completely. This can't be happening. I am the Choi daughter. I am. I've been the daughter for 28 years. I've lived this life, attended these parties, built these relationships. You've been a fraud for 28 years, Soo-Yeon corrected. You lived my life. You enjoyed my inheritance. You wore my family's jewelry and attended parties in my place while I was being beaten and starved, while I was sleeping on concrete floors and being told I was worthless. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And now it's over. Chairman Choi raised his hand, and security personnel moved through the crowd toward Madame BEGS and Miran. There's nowhere to run, he said quietly. No money to bribe your way out. We've frozen all your accounts. No connections to protect you. Everyone in this room now knows exactly what you are. Everything you had came from me, and I'm taking it all back. Sung-ho, please. Madame BEGS fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, ruining the makeup she had spent hours perfecting. I loved you. I gave you everything. You gave me lies, Chairman Choi replied. You stole my daughter's birthright. You let an innocent girl suffer while you protected an imposter. There is no forgiveness for that. Not from me. Not from anyone. The security guards reached them. As they escorted the two women through the silent, staring crowd, Miran twisted around to look at Soo-Yeon one last time. This isn't over, she screamed. I'll find a way to destroy you. I'll make you pay for taking everything from me. You'll regret this. You'll... The ballroom doors closed behind her, cutting off her threats. Soo-Yeon stood beside her father, surrounded by Seoul's elite, wearing millions of dollars in jewels, the undisputed heir to one of Asia's largest fortunes, and she felt nothing but calm. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman Choi announced, please enjoy the rest of the evening. There will be no more interruptions. He turned to his daughter and smiled. I believe it's time for you to take your place in society. Shall we mingle? In a moment. Soo-Yeon touched his arm gently. There are a few more people here I need to speak with first. She had spotted them the moment she descended the stairs. Madame Kang and Yoo Jin, standing near the back of the ballroom with glasses of champagne they could no longer afford, wearing designer gowns that were probably borrowed or rented. They must have scraped together every favor they had left to secure an invitation to tonight's event, hoping to rehabilitate their social standing. They had come to the wrong party. Soo-Yeon glided through the crowd toward them. The guests parted before her like waves before a ship, their expressions a mix of curiosity, respect, and carefully concealed fear. She was no longer the nameless servant. She was the Choi heiress. She was someone. When she reached the Kang women, both looked as if they wanted to disappear into the floor. Madame Kang, Miss Yoo Jin. Soo-Yeon smiled pleasantly. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. I thought you would be too busy packing your belongings and preparing for your new accommodations. Madame Kang's face was ashen. Miss Choi, we had no idea who you were. If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me differently? Soo-Yeon tilted her head. That's interesting. So you only abuse people you think can't fight back? You only beat and starve and torment people when you're certain there are no consequences? Please. Yoo Jin's voice trembled. We're sorry. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. If you could just what? Forgive you? Give you money? Use my new connections to help you rebuild your social standing. Soo-Yeon's smile didn't waver, but her eyes were ice. I told you 3 months ago that I wasn't going to destroy you completely. I'm a woman of my word. You'll be allowed to live your lives in obscurity, working whatever jobs will hire you, living in whatever apartments you can afford." She leaned closer. "But I will never forgive you. And every person in this room knows what you did to me. Good luck finding anyone willing to help you now." She turned and walked away, leaving them standing alone in a sea of whispers and pointed stares. 6 months after the gala, Soo-Yeon stood in the corner office of Choi Group headquarters, her office now, looking out at the Seoul skyline. So much had changed in such a short time that sometimes she still couldn't quite believe it was real. Madame Bayek and Miran were awaiting trial, their assets frozen, their social standing destroyed. The investigation had uncovered even more crimes than expected: bribery, fraud, money laundering, attempted witness tampering. They would likely spend years in prison. The Kang family had fared only slightly better. Madame Kang had avoided prison time by cooperating with investigators looking into her late husband's death. It turned out he had been murdered, just as Soo-Yeon had always suspected, and Madame Kang's testimony had helped secure evidence against the assassins she had hired. But her cooperation didn't earn her forgiveness, only a lighter sentence. She had lost everything else: the mansion, the cars, the jewelry, all of it seized to pay restitution and penalties. Last Soo-Yeon had heard, Madame Kang and Yoo-jin were sharing a tiny one-room apartment in a rundown neighborhood, working as cleaning ladies in the same type of luxury houses they used to own. Every day they scrubbed floors on their knees just as Soo-Yeon had once done for them. Justice, Soo-Yeon had learned, could be beautifully poetic. And she? She had become one of the most powerful women in South Korea. Chairman Choi had announced his retirement 2 months ago, naming his daughter as his successor. The business world had been skeptical at first. This unknown woman, appearing out of nowhere to take over a corporate empire. But Soo-Yeon had proved them all wrong. She was smart, strategic, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. But she was also fair, compassionate, and determined to build something better than what had come before. "Miss Choi?" Secretary Han appeared at her door. "Your 3 o'clock appointment is here." Soo-Yeon turned from the window. "Send him in." The man who entered was tall and handsome, with sharp features and intelligent eyes. Kang Woo-jin, no relation to her stepmother's family thankfully, was the CEO of one of Choi Group's competitors, and one of the most eligible bachelors in Seoul's business world. "Miss Choi." He bowed slightly. "Thank you for meeting with me." "Mr. Kang." Soo-Yeon gestured to the seating area. "Please, sit down. Your proposal was intriguing." They had been circling each other for months, professionally, at first. His company wanted a partnership with Choi Group. Her company wanted access to his technology. The negotiations had been complex, challenging, and oddly exhilarating. Woo-jin was unlike any man Soo-Yeon had ever met. He didn't treat her like a princess to be coddled, or a prize to be won. He treated her like an equal, challenging her ideas, pushing back against her strategies, never letting her win just because of her family name. In meetings, they argued about market projections and expansion plans with the intensity of warriors on a battlefield. And when those meetings ended, there was always a moment, a brief pause, a lingering look that suggested something more beneath the professional surface. "You're the most infuriating woman I've ever negotiated with," Woo-jin told her after a particularly heated discussion about merger terms. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Soo-Yeon asked, gathering her documents. "It's the truth." He stood as well, moving closer than professional courtesy required. "Every time I think I have you figured out, you surprise me. Every time I prepare a counter-argument, you've already anticipated it and moved 3 steps ahead. It's exhausting." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "And fascinating." "You should see me when I'm actually trying to be difficult," Soo-Yeon replied, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Their first official date was at a small restaurant in Bukchon Hanok Village, traditional Korean cuisine served in a beautifully preserved Hanok building. Woo-jin had chosen the location specifically because it was quiet, private, and far from the business districts where they might be recognized. I didn't want our first real conversation to be interrupted by reporters or business associates, he explained, pouring her a cup of traditional rice wine. Tonight, I want to know who Choi Soo-Yeon really is. Not the heiress, not the CEO, just the woman. Soo-Yeon considered the question carefully. I'm not sure I know the answer to that anymore. For 28 years, I didn't know who I was. A stolen child, an orphan raised by a stranger, a servant in a house that should have been mine. Now, I'm supposed to be the Choi daughter, the future of an empire. But sometimes... She trailed off. Sometimes I still feel like that scared girl in the storage closet, waiting for someone to hit her again. Woo-jin reached across the table and took her hand. You're not that girl anymore, and anyone who tries to hurt you now will have to go through me first. I can protect myself, Soo-Yeon said, but she didn't pull her hand away. I know you can. That's not the point. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The point is that you don't have to do it alone anymore. Not if you don't want to. But lately, the meetings had become something more. Longer, more personal, full of lingering looks and meaningful pauses. I'll be direct, Woo-jin said, sitting across from her. The partnership terms are almost finalized. But that's not why I'm here today. Oh? Soo-Yeon raised an eyebrow. I've spent 4 months watching you dismantle your enemies, rebuild your company, and transform yourself into one of the most powerful people in this country. He met her eyes steadily. I've never met anyone like you, and I'd like to take you to dinner. Despite herself, Soo-Yeon felt a smile tugging at her lips. Dinner? Just dinner, no business, no negotiations, just 2 people getting to know each other. He paused. Although I should warn you, I don't lose easily, at anything. Neither do I, Soo-Yeon replied. It seems we're well matched. She thought about everything she had been through. The abuse, the starvation, the years of being told she was worthless. And now here she was, being pursued by one of the most successful men in Korea, sitting in an office that overlooked the entire city, with the power to make or break fortunes with a single decision. Friday, she said finally. 7 o'clock. And Mr. Kang, don't be late. His smile was brilliant. I wouldn't dream of it. After he left, Soo-Yeon returned to the window. The sun was setting over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere out there, Madame Bayek and Miran were sitting in prison cells, contemplating the ruin of their lives. Somewhere else, Madame Kang and Woo-jin were scrubbing floors, remembering the servant they had tormented. And here stood Soo-Yeon, the real daughter, finally in her rightful place. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. Proud of you. Always. Love, Dad. She smiled. For 28 years she had been lost. For 3 years she had been broken. But now she was found. Now she was whole. And she was just getting started. The story of Soo-Yeon doesn't end with her triumph at the gala or her rise to power at Choi Group. It continues in boardrooms and ballrooms, in the quiet moments with her father and the electric ones with Woo-jin. It continues every time she makes a decision that affects thousands of employees, every time she stands her ground against those who underestimate her, every time she remembers where she came from and uses that memory to fuel her compassion for others. 1 year after the gala, Soo-Yeon established the Second Chance Foundation, dedicated to helping abuse survivors rebuild their lives. She funded shelters, job training programs, legal assistance, and counseling services for women escaping situations just like the one she had survived. The foundation grew quickly, supported by donations from across the business community, and staffed by people who believed in its mission. You could have just moved on, a reporter asked her during the foundation's launch. You could have tried to forget the past. Why do this? Because I remember being hopeless, Soo-Yeon replied. I remember believing that no one would ever help me, that I was truly alone in the world. that the abuse would never end. If I can show even one person that survival is possible, that justice is possible, then everything I went through has meaning. 2 years after the gala, Soo-Yeon and Woo-jin were married in a ceremony that made headlines across Asia. Chairman Choi walked his daughter down the aisle, tears streaming down his face, finally able to give her the moment he had dreamed of for 28 years. The wedding was beautiful, elegant, and filled with genuine love, a far cry from the cold transactions that passed for marriages in their social circle. 3 years after the gala, Soo-Yeon gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. She named the girl Jae-won, after the man who had raised her, who had loved her when he had no reason to, who had given her a foundation strong enough to survive everything that came after. It was her way of honoring both her past and her future. And 5 years after the gala, when a journalist asked her what she wanted people to remember about her story, Soo-Yeon thought for a long moment before answering. "I want them to remember that darkness is not permanent," she said finally. "I want them to remember that the people who hurt you, who try to diminish you, who treat you as less than human, they do not get to write your ending. You write your ending. And if you survive long enough, if you hold on tight enough to who you really are, the truth will find its way to the light." She smiled. "I am living proof of that." In a women's prison outside Seoul, Madame BEGS was released after serving 4 years. She returned to a world that had forgotten her, to a daughter who blamed her for everything, to a life stripped of every luxury and privilege she had once enjoyed. She would spend her remaining years in bitter obscurity, watching from afar as the woman she had tried to erase became more powerful and beloved with each passing year. In that same prison, Miran served her sentence with far less grace. She never stopped proclaiming her innocence, never stopped insisting that she was the real victim, never stopped planning revenge that she would never have the resources to execute. When she was finally released, she found that the world had moved on without her. Every attempt to rebuild her life failed. Every relationship ended when her history surfaced. She had stolen 28 years from the real Choi daughter, and now she would spend the rest of her life paying for it. In a modest house on the outskirts of Seoul, Madame Kang and Woo-jin lived together in bitter silence, their relationship poisoned by blame and regret. The mother blamed the daughter for their extravagant spending that had made their theft necessary. The daughter blamed the mother for targeting the wrong victim. Neither could accept responsibility for their own cruelty, and so they remained trapped together, united only by their shared misery. And in the penthouse of one of Seoul's finest buildings, Soo-Yeon tucked her children into bed, kissed her husband goodnight, and stood for a moment at the window, looking out at the city that had become her kingdom. She thought about the girl she used to be, the servant in the storage closet, the one who had forgotten what it felt like to be loved, to be valued, to matter. That girl had been lost in the darkness for so long. But the darkness had not destroyed her. It had forged her. And now, standing in the light, Choi Soo-Yeon smiled. She had won.